The number one thing that I've heard from people has been a teacher publicly shaming them when they were in
Yes.
third grade or whatever. These are adult human beings that come to my classes and they still struggle with that moment of impact that took place because that's when they lost their perception of self. They didn't even know it. They had no understanding that moment the teacher shamed them in front of the whole classroom, the kid self, I call it the thriver self, the innocence, the playful, I love myself part
Yeah.
is lost. And that's invisible loss. And that's a primary invisible loss.
Well, hello there, and welcome to this episode of the Terri Cole Show. This conversation, I think you guys are going to love. It is my friend Christina Rasmussen. She is an acclaimed grief educator and best-selling author of Second Firsts and Where Did You Go? And this book that we're talking about in this episode is called Invisible Loss, which just came out 2 days ago. So in 2010, 4 years after her 35-year-old spouse passed away from stage 4 colon cancer, she created the Life Reentry Process, which launched her on a mission to bring compassion, grace, and validation to thousands, while simultaneously establishing an exit from what she terms the waiting room. So her work on grief, I've used with my therapy clients for years. It is so powerful. She holds a master's degree in guidance and counseling. She currently is finishing her master's degree in painting and drawing. She's also very creative. Her grief work has been featured on ABC News and all over the place. She is wonderful, and I really think you guys are going to enjoy this conversation with Christina Rasmussen as much as I enjoyed interviewing her. I am so excited to welcome my pal, Christina Rasmussen, back to the Terri Cole Show. Welcome back, Christina.
I am so happy to be here with you right now, Terri, and with everyone else too. But this feels amazing to be here. Thank you for
I
having me.
know. I miss you. It's like I stalk you online. And
Me
then when
too.
we get on here because we're supposed to do a professional interview and we start shooting the shit and we're like, oh my God, we've got to stop talking. So
Yes.
we will talk privately, but now there's so many exciting things happening in your world and so much stuff that's beneficial to us. So let's just talk about the most exciting thing is that you literally 2 days ago, your latest beautiful book, baby, came out called Invisible
Yes.
Loss, Recognizing and Healing the Unacknowledged Heartbreak of Everyday
Hmm.
Grief. Oh my God, Christina, when I started reading this book, I was like, we need this book so bad. So
Thank you.
let's just start with, first of all, why this book? Why this book?
And thank you for asking this question. I want to start by saying I was blown away when I first started seeing a different form of grief. And I've been talking about this forever, but I have goosebumps even just every time I say it. I discovered this different form of grief amongst people who had experienced a lot of tragedy. So we
Mm-hmm.
were not focusing on anything else. We knew someone lost a spouse, someone lost
Sure.
a partner from a
Mm-hmm.
marriage, difficult things, someone lost a child, tragic losses. And Terri, it what started happening was that I could see something else pulling them back to what I have coined the waiting room, that stuck, loopy place where we can't breathe, where we can't feel alive again. And I was like, what is that? Because it wasn't a tragedy. It wasn't
Right.
the traditional form of loss that we all know about. It wasn't even the other losses that we acknowledge and validate. It was something else, and it had no words. It had no language. And Terri, it was powerful and catastrophic to the person. That was around 2014 when it started happening. And when I started putting the groups together, the validation experience, and I'm sure you've seen that too, the acknowledgement and witnessing of each other was huge. But then it wasn't about tragedy. That's what brought everyone together. But it was like a ghost, a phantom loss that kept showing up. And we delved further in, and I discovered something that I call invisible loss, and it is subtle. It's not
Mm.
only that others don't see it in us, we don't see it in us, which is very difficult. It is the form of loss that is unacknowledged, unvalidated, and it comes from what I call a moment of impact, kind of an emotional punch when we feel rejected, disregarded,
Mm.
thrown away, isolated. And it is something we don't talk about because we don't even know that's what we're experiencing.
What you're saying about this is that
Mhm.
you would have people in your groups, you're processing what the
Yes.
big, the obvious losses, the losses that brought them to your grief work to begin
Yes.
with.
Hmm.
And then people were getting sucked back into what you describe as the waiting room, which
Yes.
is basically that purgatory between living and
Yes.
not living, sort of being
Yes.
frozen in time. You can't like move
Yes.
forward with your life. You're not
Yes.
feeling excited about things. And what you discovered in your research and in the years that you've been doing this is that these invisible losses were the things that sort of drove them back to the waiting room. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Correct. And we didn't know why. The default setting in our mind would say it's because of the loss of my spouse or my child or whatever
Sure,
that was, which is very traumatic and catastrophic.
sure.
And for most of the time in the beginning, I would say, yes, of course, that's it. But that was not it. And it was actually a very hard thing to acknowledge as well, because, hey, this person has gone through so much, but this is not what's getting them back to that waiting room. It was a very hard thing to believe. And actually, if it wasn't for my community and their courage
Yeah.
to acknowledge that for themselves and others in that group, we wouldn't have made these discoveries. And I'm saying we, because my work would not be what it is if it wasn't from my learning from this amazing community of people,
Yes.
of courageous heroes and souls.
Yes,
So
totally. Same.
yeah.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about how can people watching on YouTube or listening to the pod,
Mhm.
how can they start to sort of identify their own invisible losses?
Yes. And that's the tricky part. And even writing this book, how do you describe something that we don't talk about or we don't really acknowledge? Very first thing to do is to take a pause and find yourself with some paper and pen. And I know this is very basic, but it's
Mhm.
important to go back to the basics. And I always say to people, you have been looping in your mind those thoughts for so long, you don't even know what is yours and what isn't. So I divided the self into three selves. The survivor self is the part of us that got us through those moments of impact, that got
Mhm.
us through those moments of rejection, that invisible loss and our parents, our friends, our families couldn't acknowledge. And it's not their fault. They have their own invisible
Mhm.
losses
Hmm.
and their own survivor self. I just want to say there's no blame to end.
Right.
The only part of the world that I blame is the collective voice that needs to change. And this is why we're having this conversation. That survivor self basically started creating choices for you that would keep you safe and in survival mode. And you started to look at yourself in a different way. You lost the perception of who you were, you lost that original self. I have to say this before I start to talk about what it is that we need to do and what it is that we need to write
Hmm.
and what it is that we need to acknowledge, because we don't even know we're not ourselves. We
Right.
don't even know when it was that that true original self lost their own perception of identity. When
Mm.
did we forget how awesome we were? How did we stop believing in our own abilities and skills? So
Hmm.
when we started, I guess it's a kind of a masquerade. We have this survivor identity that keeps us safe and we think we might even have a great life.
Right.
We actually think that maybe it's not so bad our life. Look, someone else has it worse. How many
Hmm.
times do you hear that, Terry? Says,
Yes. Oh,
what should I
all the
complain about?
time.
Look at them. They had this happen to them. I'm look at
Yeah.
me in my house. I'm looking with my family. Everyone is still alive. What do I have to
Yep.
complain about? And that's our
Yep.
first mistake. So the very
Yeah.
first thing I would say is that try your best to never say that to yourself again, and then interrupt someone else when they say it for them and validate and acknowledge what it is that they are suffering from.
Yeah.
We don't actually talk to each other. We don't talk to ourselves. I was looking at some data this morning for an article I was writing, and we talk about current events, Terry. We talk about general things about our family. Hi, my husband got this job.
Yep.
We talk to our friends. We have a good time. We have 50% of us have friends, but we never really talk about our feelings. So the very first thing I would say is start writing by yourself and start sharing something that bothers you.
Mm.
Simply put.
Yep. Yes. And keeping it sort of keeping it very like basic.
Yes,
Right.
thank you.
Because
Thank
I,
you.
I think that what you're saying, and I think it's very true that, you know, these impactful moments of discomfort or rejection, or in being familiar with what you're writing in the book, it's almost like self-abandonment too.
Yes.
There are
Huge
moments
loss.
of that, right?
Yes.
Where instead of standing up for ourselves with someone, we sort of don't say anything, so we go along to get along. But all of
Yes.
those things chip away at our authentic sense of self, is basically what you're saying.
Yes.
And that these are the invisible losses, like one sort of piece at a time. And it's getting, you're suggesting, as we get more real about how we feel, just even if you start with exactly what you said, one thing that's bothering you,
Yes.
right? Just acknowledging it. And how, what do you see in your clients and in your groups when we start acknowledging the things
I think
that
it's
are
very
bothering
emotional.
us?
It's a very emotional experience there. And I know the reason
Mm-hmm.
why your work resonates with me so much is because you're actually helping so many people in this kind of grief. Actually, it's
Mm-hmm.
huge. It is very emotional. The very first thing that people feel, Terry, is uh, more loss. And I write about this in the book. I say, you are going to actually feel like you're suffering more once you start
Right.
realizing what has
Yeah.
happened to you. It's actually going to
Yeah.
feel really hard, and you're going to cry, you're going to shed tears. I did for my own losses, and I
Yeah.
have seen thousands of people do the same. And we need those tears. We need to cry them out. We need to cleanse them. We need to first and foremost acknowledge it in ourselves,
Right.
like that this is a real loss. Let's say actually public rejection. The number one thing that I've heard from people has been a teacher publicly shaming them when they were in
Yes.
third grade or whatever. These are adult human beings that come to my classes that are in their 50s and 60s, 40s, however old, and they still struggle with that moment of
Yeah.
impact that took place, because that's when they lost their perception of self.
Yeah.
They didn't even, I could cry about this, they didn't even know it. They had
Yeah.
no understanding that moment the teacher shamed them in front of the whole classroom.
Yeah.
And in our generation, Terry, things used to be, talk about my
Yeah.
Greek education in Greece, they
Dude.
they used to be like physical
Yeah. Like
violence,
beating you with a ruler.
beating you up with a ruler. Yes.
Yep.
So in that moment in time, the kid self, I call it the thriver self, the innocence, the playful, I love myself part
Yeah.
is lost. And that's invisible loss. And that's a primary invisible loss.
Oh, so painful. And
Yeah.
Christina, I can say from my 25-year, 27-year therapy practice,
Yes.
that those let's say teachers or coaches, who I cannot even recount how many times a client would say that was the inception of their eating disorder.
Oh,
That was the
yes.
inception of
Hmm.
they started drinking. They say, even in middle school,
Yes.
where
Yes.
the impact of that invisible loss, because exactly what you say, like, until we're sitting in therapy unpacking these things, the person doesn't even know that it's an important interaction that
Yes.
happened. They knew it was painful, but they never gave it the credit, as you're saying and as you're teaching us in this book,
Yes.
to give it the credit that it deserves.
It didn't. And then it's like stringing pearls together
Mm,
because that experience keeps repeated in the workplace, and it becomes so much harder.
yeah.
And we are then not only in the waiting room, in our relationships, but in our career choices, in our marriages, in everything. Imagine you have this great job, and I've seen this a lot. Everyone else thinks it's great, and
Mhm.
you have convinced yourself this is great, but you're not doing what you're here to do because you're so afraid of that humiliation, and your perception of self has shifted so much over the years. I don't know why I'm feeling you're such a good listener. I feel like I could cry about this for everyone. Your perception of self has shifted so much that you're in survival mode, even when you look great, when you
Mm,
appear that you have it together, even when your house looks like pristine and your
right.
kids seem to be doing well. That's the anomaly of this kind of loss.
Yeah, and also the sadness of that, because you don't get to enjoy when you're emotionally, psychologically in the waiting room, as you
Yeah.
say. And
Yeah.
and again, for those of you who are just joining, this is basically a concept that Christina originated about. You have these experiences where you're sort of not living your life fully. So being in the waiting room is like you're not really fully enjoying life. You can't really move on. You're sort of stuck. It's almost like I visualize it. Christina, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I
No, it's
visualize
great.
it as a purgatory, but we're almost sort of we're stuck. We're like
Yeah.
frozen in time.
Yeah. And we don't even know it sometimes. The more you've struggled, the more intelligent you are, the more intelligent your survivor self is. I have
Yeah.
been in waiting rooms, and I'm sure you have, Terry, too, that it took me a really long time to figure them out. And my goodness, when we do figure them out, it's like running out of jail.
Yeah. You're like, oh, thank God, get me out of
Oh
here.
my God. You
Yes.
know?
So
Uh,
much. All right.
yeah.
So in the book, you talk about the three inner narrators that
Yes.
we have. So let's talk a little bit about that.
I love talking about them. So everyone has these three inner narrators. Even when people come to me and over the years say, I don't think I'm grieving.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I have these experiences you're talking about. It doesn't happen often, but it does happen. I want to say to you, unfortunately, I have seen this in every culture, in every language, in every upbringing, however far away or close, our thoughts come in survival mode. For example, I'll just give an example of myself. But right now, I've known Terry for many, many years. I love Terry. I feel like we're friends. But it's always like my survivor self said, "Are you ready for this interview?" And I turned around and said, "Are you kidding me?" And the survival self said, "You should maybe read your book again." And I've had other interviews too, and it's the same. It's the same thought. That thought is not from my original self. It is not from me.
Mm-hmm.
This is the survivor self keeping me safe in the waiting room,
Mm-hmm.
believing that it may not be good enough or well enough to deliver this. And that goes for everyone preparing for a meeting or preparing for a job interview, whatever that is, going on a first date, even. So that's the
Right.
survivor self. It catastrophizes the future. It keeps you safe. It convinces you that the waiting room is the best place for you to be. I want to say it's going to feel as if it's the right choice. You're
Yeah.
going to feel like you're making the right decision.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times it isn't. So that's
Mm-hmm.
one third. The second part is the part of you I call the watcher self. And I was very specific when I named that part
Mm-hmm.
because it is the witness of you. It
Yeah.
knows all of your thoughts. It has known you from day one. It knows your original true self and authentic
Mm-hmm.
self. It knows your capabilities. It actually remembers the real identity of you, and you have all the answers and all the wisdoms. And I would say if survivor self is 80% of our actions, habits, behavior, language, so I know it's a
Mm-hmm.
lot, that part is like maybe 15%. Sometimes when we're in the right company with the right type of friends, we can access that watch yourself and say, you know what, maybe I do know what I need to do. Maybe I do have the answers. Maybe where I am right now is not the right place for me. Maybe this relationship, however great it looks to my girlfriends, maybe this is not for me. Maybe I don't even love that person. And I know, Terry, you've had clients and you've had people in your classes that have made these realizations.
Mm-hmm.
And then that 5%, unfortunately, is left for the most fun part of us, the thriver self. And
Mm-hmm.
I wish I could give more percentage to that thriver narrator, but it is actually for some people, it doesn't even exist anymore. I've had people in my classes over the years, and I remember the very first time someone said to me, we do this thriver exercise, which is in the book. He goes, I don't have any thriver memories. I don't remember. I have no recollection of my fun, playful, innocent child self that believes that can do anything in the
Mm-hmm.
world. And we had to work hard to help this person and others in the future create thriver memories from scratch now so they can give birth to that thriver self, because unfortunately, our memories are not real either. We actually remember the things we visit the most, which is the survivor thoughts, which is the hard things in our lives that we are trying to keep ourselves safe from. So
Mm-hmm.
these are our three narrators. And the work of the book, it's basically a friend of mine read the book and she turned around and said to me, Christina, I didn't realize you're going to make me work so hard. And I wish I could say that this will come easy. We've been in this place for a really long time, and we're also not aware of it, unfortunately. For some of us, we are. We know something is not right. It doesn't feel the way it's supposed to feel. But we've convinced ourselves, and the collective, I call it the collective survivor voice, has reflected to us that wherever we are is good enough because we should be grateful. I hate it when people say be grateful.
Mm-hmm.
When you're complaining about something or saying something is not right. So we are conditioned to not share things that will feel shameful. And the thriver self dies.
Yes, but there's something that you're really talking about with the bypassing and
Yes.
with the institutionalization almost, or the indoctrinization, is that a word,
Yes.
uh, to this belief that if you have a complaint, that you're ungrateful. That
Yes.
and it's funny, my mother, to combat this growing up, my mother used to say, rather than teaching you to not complain, she would say it's okay because that kid may have no feet, but I still have no shoes. And so she was basically teaching me in a way that your pain matters. Even if other people are suffering
That's right.
more, you can be
What a great teacher.
compassionate. Yes,
Yes.
she actually was and still is a
Yeah.
great teacher in respect to, she also expected me to be of service, and to, if you can help, you must. If you have more than others, you must share.
Oh,
Like, I got lots of messaging through that. But that mindset makes you realize that how you feel actually matters. And I think that so many of us did
yes.
not have Janie Cole as a mom, and
No.
did not get that messaging, that how you
No.
feel. And it's a way to sort of to shut you down. If you're
Yes.
saying I'm in pain, and someone's saying people in this country don't have food, or whatever it is, you're like,
Yeah.
okay, that boy still broke up with me though, and I'm still brokenhearted. And it taught us to disavow our own feelings.
Yes.
So
Yes.
so how do you interrupt your the survivor thoughts?
Yes. So I call it mental stacking. I
Okay.
call it also the code, the survivor code, the repetitive fear and
Mhm.
doubt of self and the abilities of self. Sometimes it's very hard to find. So I ask people, and we actually do, we're doing right now this collective cleanses publicly on Facebook in front of
Yay.
everyone. And actually, would you believe people are brave and want to cleanse in front of 500,000 followers. Like
Yeah,
they want to cleanse. There will be some people who say this is private, and I say no. This is up to you, but you can also do it on your own. This is your choice.
sure.
But so
But
we
when you
have
say cleanse,
yes,
tell
yes,
us,
we
what do you
have to
mean?
cleanse. I call it a stream of thoughts, a stream of conscious. That you need to grab the pen and know that you need to get through a few sentences. You can have a verbal cleanse, so you can talk to your therapist, you can talk
Hmm.
to a friend, and if you don't have a friend, and it's very people are very lonely, people don't have people to talk to. If you do not have a friend and you do not have a therapist or someone, even actually strangers are even better than friends
Yeah,
sometimes,
totally.
as you know.
Uh-huh.
Um, I want you to grab a pen and paper and start writing down anything that comes to your mind unedited. And so unedited that the survivor self will try to actually correct you. And I'm differentiating ourselves from the survivor, thriver, and watcher because I do believe that ultimately we are an integrated a whole self.
Sure.
The last phase is the integration phase in the book, but before the integration, we are so separated from those parts of ourselves. But you're
Mm.
right, and you have to make sure that you read what you wrote for as long the cleanse. Actually, I've had thousands of people write to me and say, tell people to write in the morning, tell people not to do it at night. I mean, people have opinions about this cleanse exercise. Write until you feel you're done writing, and then I want you to read and look for the fear and look for the doubt where it's hiding.
Mm.
Then you take that thought out of there and know that's a survivor thought. And then you have to do a stack with your watcher self. How do you reframe that? I could write a whole book about reframing. This is a common practice amongst therapists
Yeah.
and in the professional world. But reframing We have so much resistance in reframing something that's so hard, and people
Mm-hmm.
get angry around how to reframe, Terry, something that is not easily frameable or changeable.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have a lot of tools in the book to help you reframe something. You reframe that with your watcher self, and then I call it the plug-in. The third stack is where you plug in to the new life that's outside of the future life, the real life that's outside of the waiting room, with a very low risk
Mm.
action. Can I just say, I don't believe in jumping and the net will appear methodology. I have seen people jump and run back to the waiting room and go under the bed and never come out for the rest of their
Mm.
lives because that proved to their survivor self that they're not safe outside.
Yeah. Yep.
You've seen this, right? You've seen
I
this.
have, and I have to say, Christina, in so many ways, I really do agree with you, and I'm always a proponent of small, consistent steps equal
Yes.
sustainable transformation.
Thank you. That's important
Yeah.
because this is like the thing is the first step, the second step out could feel so small. But I
Mm-hmm.
want everyone to celebrate that because that, my
Right.
friend, is what's going to save your life.
Yeah.
That's going to stop you from running errands from other people and pleasing them. And so much to say about that. So small plug in. I will always just say 5% risk. So your amygdala, your fear center in your brain does not get activated.
Mm.
We can't, if we activate the fear center, which is the house of the survivor self,
Right.
it will tell you don't buy that dress to go on that date, or don't even write that email for that job, or don't speak to your boss about your promotion, or
Yep.
don't tell your mother that she hurt you when you were growing up. Don't tell your brother that he shouldn't talk to you. I mean, the stories, there's so
Right.
many. So it has to be small and celebrate it. And that concludes the stack. And when we take 10, 15 minutes of our day doing that, even if you have 5 minutes to do that mental stacking,
Mm-hmm.
every day your brain actually changes and shifts from the primal fear kind of living life to that higher level living and experiencing that we lost when that teacher shamed us in front of the whole
Yeah.
classroom, for example.
Right. It's
Yeah.
like a reclamation, you know? So,
Yes.
what's the first thing that any of us can do? Let's just say tomorrow to help ourselves and our loved ones to start coping with invisible losses.
Yes. At the moment you listen to this conversation, everyone will start thinking, "Oh my gosh, what's mine? What is my invisible loss? I want to know,
Hmm.
right?" And of course, the book will give you all those answers. But
Sure.
even if you don't get the book, and this is you're just listening to this, and then you're gonna go
But
in your
get the book
busy
is what I
life,
say.
get the
But go
book,
ahead.
yes. But the very first thing to do is stop questioning yourself about something that you know is not right for you. I know that everyone who's listening right now, there's an inner conversation going on about, I'm getting goosebumps again because I know, Terry, you see this a lot. There's an inner conversation that's taking place in your life that your survivor self, which could have come from your mother or father or someone in your life, that would say, stop overreacting. That wasn't a big deal. She didn't really speak to you this way. So, whatever
Yeah.
it is in your life today that you are, you know, it doesn't feel right, but you've told yourself it's okay, stop making a big deal out of this. I want you to
Mm.
stop and acknowledge that this is a real issue and this is a real problem, and that you validate that feeling for
Mm.
yourself. And that's the first step to finding what that primary invisible loss was. And slowly from there, we move into other questions and other exercises. But everyone who's listening, I believe, has
Yeah.
something in their minds they're not sharing with anyone, and they're just they're not sitting well with something, but they're not doing anything about it because they think they're in the wrong, because
Right.
we doubt that identity, we doubt ourselves, we've been doubting ourselves since forever ago.
Yeah. Since the beginning, since we were
Yeah.
since we were sort of that belief in self,
Hmm.
sort of gets beaten out
Yeah.
of us to a degree by just life and
Yeah.
reality and society and socialization and cultures.
Yes.
So you guys watching and listening, the book is Invisible Loss: Recognizing and Healing the Unacknowledged Heartbreak of Everyday Grief by my friend Christina Rasmussen. Now, you guys, this book came out 2 days ago. You can get it everywhere fine books are sold. So where can people find you, Christina?
They can go to christinarasmussen.com. And I also have, and this is free for everyone. And this is, I hope one day we'll have millions of invisible losses in there. I created an invisible loss library.
Amazing.
And so you go to invisiblelosses.com, and it's basically where you can just use a few words and you submit your invisible loss. You can do it anonymously. And then someone in my team goes and just makes it public, and you can read everyone else's. So, yes, go to my website, buy the book, but
Yay.
go and contribute to the Invisible Loss Library,
Yes,
please.
please. I'm definitely going there.
Yes.
Thank you, Christina. It's so great to see you. I love you so much. I cannot wait to reconnect. You guys go get this book. You need it. To be continued.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you so much for having me. This was so good.